just bringing in the Wirraway now, you'll see he's doing not a square approach or a square circuit like you would see at Archerfield or Bankstown or down in Moorabbin. This aircraft, it's not as bad as flying in the V12s later on, but his eye line is basically obscured by the front of the engine cowling to a degree. So instead of flying a square circuit, he actually does a curved approach, so he keeps the airfield inside at all times, and then straightens up, and he's using his peripheral vision, it's easy for me to say, to land. So he's basically feeling his way down. Much more prominent in the Spitfires and Mustangs and P40s we'll see later.
Yeah, I was talking to Squadron Leader Dan Kehoe, one of the 100 Squadron pilots earlier, and he was saying the way to land those tail draggers, the big V12s, is if you can't see the runway, you're on the runway. If you can see the runway out the side, you're probably on the grass.
Oh, so true. Look at the use of the rudder there, that control surface, flicking backwards and forwards, Broomy keeping the aircraft absolutely straight. Something that jet pilots don't know what to do with the rudder, they just think that's a footrest.
They are the footrest, and actually you'll see the F-35 later doing some pretty amazing manoeuvres. But now we've got one of the earlier queens of the skies, the DC3, better known as the DAC, coming past from the right. See the second aircraft coming past, painted up in Arju colours, so that's the Aircraft Research and Development Unit based out of Edinburgh in South Australia.
They were the last unit to actually use it.
Yeah, they took it all the way up to 1999. When you think this aircraft was designed and built in the 30s, that's an incredible period of time operating the same aircraft.
When they started this, Douglas had produced an aircraft called the DC2, and one of those aircraft competed in an air race from London down through to Melbourne, and they decided, let's upgrade this. It was a highly successful. Can you imagine flying an airliner in an air race with purpose-built aircraft like the de Havilland Comets, and I'm talking about the piston engine ones, not the jet ones. But they built the DC3 1935. They started out as a transcontinental machine, just ferrying passengers across the continental United States. It actually flew on the 17th of December 1935, which was only the 32nd anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. So that short period of time between Kitty Hawk and there was amazing.
And we talked about the Wirraway being a bit of an everything aircraft in terms of a fighter sense, but the Dakota was really an everything aircraft in the transport sense. It did so many different things throughout its service. The USAF even used it in Vietnam as a gunship, so it would fly around in circles, have a whole bunch of weapons fitted to the side of the aircraft, much like the AC-130J these days.
Both of these machines owned, flown and maintained by HARS, the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, who's got this magnificent museum down here at Shellharbour Airport. Now, the DC3, as Dan said, was used for everything, and it's pretty safe to say that there is no country on the planet that hasn't been served by a DC3. They were called the Dakota, the Goonie Bird, then you got the PR people in that called it the Sky Trooper or the Sky Train, but generally the DAC or the Goonie Bird.
Yeah, it was amazing. Over 11,000 were built in total, and actually 2,500 were built by the Soviets and the Japanese, so everyone built it. It was just such a great design and such a useful design. One of its finest hours would have been on D-Day, where over the first 2 days, Dakotas dropped over 50,000 paratroopers into occupied France.
And not only that, they were dragging gliders over as well. They were also used in the famous Bridge Too Far mission at Arnhem And these are incredibly versatile. Skis, normal undercarriage, they fly anywhere. These have been used in the Arctic and the Antarctic as well. And as you can see, still soldiering on today.
And I have a bit of a personal connection with the DC3. My fiance's grandfather was actually an artillery observer in the British Army in World War II, and he was towed in a glider by a DC3 into D-Day.
One of the other things that these aircraft were used, they were a transport, but they were also used for dropping of supplies, the so-called biscuit bombers up in New Guinea. And my father recalled to me one day where his unit was bivouacked, his machine gunners group, and the DC3 came out, the C-47, pushed all of this stuff out, and they were being bombed by all of these supplies all over their position.
Yeah, it's a little bit different to how the C-130J does it these days. They have things like GPS and surveyed drop zones, where back in the day being World War II, these Dakota pilots would have a fairly rudimentary map, have to go out and find the drop zone or find the troops they're dropping the supplies to, and then just do their best using a few rules of thumb to just actually get it in the right position.
And in horrendous weather condition and mountainous terrain in New Guinea, where the weather conditions could literally change within 20 minutes.
Yeah, flying in Papua New Guinea is inherently dangerous. There's lots of mountains and there's also lots of clouds. So then you get this thing called mountain clouds, which is even worse because you can't fly into them. So generally flying in Papua New Guinea, you fly in the morning and that's it.
US Army Air Corps received its first militarised DC-3 way back in August 1939. And as Dan said, they continued right up through the Vietnam War as an active combat aircraft. You imagine 6 Gatling guns, 20mm, rate of fire of 3,000 rounds a minute. There are photos taken at night, and basically you've got the aircraft flying around in a circle. The guns are set at an angle for the angle of bank to hit the target, and that was known as the cone of death.
Yeah, it would have been quite an awesome amount of firepower coming down. Good to be on the flying side of that. You can see them coming in from the left for landing. They're in trail formation, about 2,000 feet apart, and they're actually going to land on the front 2 wheels, and then you'll see the tail wheel come down once the aircraft slows down.
And you'll see that rudder working pretty hard.
Yeah, being a tail dragger, we have those visibility problems, not as bad as the Mustangs and the Spitfires.
Just keeping the thing straight.
Yeah, and these aircraft are actually still operated in service, in work today. So Buffalo Airways in Canada actually operates DC-3s in regular transport services.
This aircraft is originally Horden with Trans-Australian Airlines, TAA. The other aircraft, as Dan described, from RDU, the Aircraft Research and Development Unit. The RAF had about 155 of these, either direct order or lend-lease aircraft, and they served with 11 squadrons. And the basis of these squadrons actually form the basis of our air mobility squadrons. These